May 25th, 1977 saw the release of George Lucas's Star Wars, which quickly became a surprise blockbuster hit. Often regarded as one of the greatest and most influential movies ever made, it helped change the way movies were made and captured the imagination of a generation. Star Wars quickly became a pop culture phenomenon. Over the course of this series, I will be joined by a number of Star Wars fans from across YouTube and the toy collecting community, as we take a look back at their earliest memories of Star Wars and find out what made Star Wars great. Hello Toy Collector fans, Universal Toy Collector here, and welcome to the channel. And welcome to episode 11 of What Made Star Wars Great, the series where I get to chat to like-minded fans from across YouTube and the toy collecting communities about their earliest memories of Star Wars and to basically find out what made Star Wars great. Now, this week's guest, he needs no introduction, so I'm not going to give him one. It's Salacious Rum. Hello, how are you, sir?
I love it that I've learned a new word, melt bag.
No, technically, I didn't say that, but yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
Oh, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. For those not in the know, Stu just messed up the intro, and he was he was castigating his errors, and he said, "What a melt bag." I'm like,
how did I know I was never going to get away with it with you? But I love it. God,
we were laughing.
The reason I didn't give you an intro is because I thought Martin and Adam gave you such a fantastic intro on there for the love of Star Wars. I couldn't beat that. So what's the point of trying? So I just here you are. How are you?
Oh, very well. Very well, Mr. Stewart. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Well, I was all right until you mentioned that I messed up and stuff. But listen, the reason I'm doing this series is because we there's a lot of big fans within the Star Wars community, and there has been a lot of negativity of recent times within Star Wars. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on it. Are those negative thoughts or feelings just?
Look, Stu, I heard you asking this before, and I have got an answer to that question.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I've noticed you do this thing, Mrs. Stewart. You ask a question, and then
I sit like this.
You put your hand like by your mouth, and you kind of lean in, like looking all highbrow, like
I'm paranoid now. But I don't know what to do with my hand.
I'm really going to analyze his response.
I don't know what to do now. I'm flummoxed.
You can't respond. Listen. So I knew you were going to ask this.
Yeah.
And I have got. And sorry, it's Bob here, by the way. Apologies.
That's okay, Bob. You're more than welcome, mate.
Let Salacious do all the talking. God damn it, Bob. Well, I have got a response to that, but can I answer that a bit later?
Because you can. Yes.
I think I can articulate it better by us discussing what we think makes Star Wars good, and then what's missing when it isn't so good.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So the first question I got for you then is, what were your earliest memories, or what are your earliest memories of Star Wars?
Okay, well, that's easy. I was born in 79. Right. But Jedi was my first. So actually, that's not true. Star Wars recorded off the TV on VHS.
I remember those days. Yeah,
oh my god, yeah. Do you remember Tipex?
Yes.
Do you remember Tipexing over the label on a VHS and rewriting the name over the top? Yeah. We were in an army household, and we lived in an isolated island in the Outer Hebrides, where no one else was about other than a small army estate, and all we had was a VHS and some blank tapes. And oh my god, I must have watched Star Wars over and over, like all of us did back then, probably 500 times. But the first Star Wars film to come out, whilst I remember, was Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And that was my first vivid memory of a promotional campaign. I remember collecting the stickers. I've still got my sticker album. And I remember the action figures. Yeah. I remember when we moved to the mainland. I remember going to Woolworths with my mum on a Saturday, being given some money and going and spending hours picking one action figure card. Yeah. So that's my earliest memory.
So with Return of the Jedi, then, did you actually see it at the theater?
I
obviously.
can't actually remember that, to be honest.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
first movie I went to see at the cinema, I do remember, was Superman, but I think it was Superman
Oh,
3. I think
okay.
it was the third, the weird one.
Yeah.
But I remember being obsessed with Return of the Jedi, particularly the sticker album
Yeah.
and the ships. And I remember like being fast. I don't think we'd seen like the B-wing before Return of the Jedi. Um, I think that might have been the first. Anyway, I just remember the ships in the um I remember the fact that they'd expanded the number of new ships and things like
Yeah.
that. Plus the Jabba scene, the creatures.
Yeah.
I remember putting the stickers together of the palace and all the creatures and thinking, this looks crazy. So that's the earliest memory.
Right.
And Star Wars was always like, I was obsessed with the toys. So
Yeah.
and I got the Millennium Falcon for Christmas, and some of the figures. I remember back then, the people debating whether you should take the figures out of the card or not.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, I
Oh,
remember
wow.
yeah,
Wow.
I remember, I think, um, yeah, I remember like being like my dad at the time going, "Oh, you should take
Yeah.
them out. You should save them." And my mum going,
Wow.
"No, let them go. Let
Wow.
them play with them." You know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because
So
I mean, it would have been unheard of, like, for me at that age to go into a toy shop, pick a load of Star Wars figures, and just go, "Yeah, they're great," and then just plonk them down, and that's it, don't play with them. The first thing you wanted to do was when you got a figure was open it up and play with it, wouldn't it, for sure?
oh,
Or
yeah,
whatever.
I didn't follow that advice. No, I ripped
Yeah.
them out, you know? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
So after, Return of the Jedi then, you know, I take it you sort of like, well, I mean, for you, was it the action, the Jedi, the music, or the story? When did you pick up on the story, or was it just the action at that age that you liked? The ships.
um, I oh god, what did I think of back then?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, I don't think when you're young, you know, you it's a bit more visceral, isn't it, when you're young?
yeah,
I don't think you understand. You know, you don't know what you do now. It was very visceral, so
yeah.
I don't think there was anything else that. Well, actually, I mean, it was a great era, wasn't it, for movies for kids?
Oh, for
So
sure. Yeah, yeah,
there were lots of other movies that came out afterwards with creatures and robots,
yeah,
and but I think it was just the first one, the first film I saw that was, this epic, fantasy, um, story. You kind of wanted to know what happened as well. I mean, after playing Star Wars 500 times in a row on a
yeah,
VHS, and following bloody C3PO and R2D2 through
yeah,
Tatooine, and then the epic trench run, you kind of want to move on, don't you? You kind of want to know,
yeah,
what's happening next.
yeah. So
Um,
after Star Wars, then came Empire Strikes Back. What was your thoughts on that? I
I
mean,
don't
did you
remember. I don't
no,
remember.
even when you watched it for the first time?
No, I remember watching it.
Yeah,
But I don't. I no, I don't really. I can't recall. I don't really remember, to be honest. I think I remember
okay,
watching Star Wars over and over, and then
yeah,
I remember Return of the Jedi coming out, but I can't remember um specific memories about. I mean, obviously I watched it, and
yeah.
I don't even think I don't even remember like the reveal being some kind of epic moment.
Wow.
I think I was just really young. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't very old,
Mm.
so I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
After my most vivid memories are, like I say, the VHS,
Yeah.
and then the build up to Return of the Jedi. I remember collecting the
Yeah.
stickers and the figures,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like some of the other peripheral stuff. We had a little army store called the Naffy,
Okay.
and you'd go there, and I'd go there with a couple of quid, and I remember buying like the erasers and the pencil toppers, and
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
I'll be
Yeah.
in there for bloody hours, picking out a
Yeah.
pencil topper. And it was always a
Mm.
running joke, give him give him 50p, and you won't see him for 4 hours. And he'd spend ages,
It's
like,
a lot of money
picking
in those
out.
days.
Yeah, I know.
God. So
So,
after Return of the Jedi, then there was no Star Wars. So then,
yeah,
around the mid-90s, um, there's
yeah.
rumors that George Lucas is going to go back and do episodes 1, 2, and 3. What were your thoughts on that? Or can you remember those thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I I mean, I really liked Shadows of the Empire. I was a big fan
Well,
of
of
that.
course, yeah, because there's all the Shadows of the Empire and stuff like that, and all the books
Yeah.
as well, wasn't there? I guess so. There was, I guess, there was plenty of Star Wars like in novel form and comic form, but nothing visually to see film wise.
No, but I do remember Shadows of the Empire. I remember
Yeah.
the N64 game,
Mm.
and I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
you know, being a fan of. We've always been a fan of. He likes Prince Caesar's Stu. He's a big.
Oh, does it? Oh,
Prince-
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
like him. I think he's a great character.
He's got pheromones, a bit like me. That
Has he really?
he seduced Leia with his pheromones.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, oh
I
yeah,
didn't know. See,
oh
I'm
yeah,
very naive when it comes to like Shadows of the
oh yeah,
Empire. Shadows of the Empire. I didn't follow that game or
oh,
story at all. So
oh yeah.
it's all. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Prince
Yeah.
Caesar, he seduced Leia with his
Wow.
pheromones. Yeah,
Wow.
that's right. That's
Wow.
right. That's why, to be honest, I mean, me and Prince Caesar have got quite a lot alike. To be honest,
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
successful with the ladies. You know,
Awesome.
so
I like
yeah.
that. I like that. So
But yeah, Shadows of
yeah,
the
go on.
Empire. What was I'm
You had
trying
the
to think.
Thrawn trilogy. Was the Thrawn trilogy out around about that time as well?
Yeah, I mean, I can't honestly say around that age I was
Yeah.
deeply into any, like reading the books and things.
Yeah.
Um, in that period of the 90s, I was at secondary school, and um, you know, I've always been a geek.
Yeah.
So I've always been into like, science fiction and movies and and things like that. But I don't remember. I've never really been reader of. I don't ever read novels very often. It's
Yeah.
always been more like give me a book on cars, or do you know what I
Yeah. Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, but I think I was definitely excited about the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I was not a huge fan when Phantom Menace
No,
came
that's okay.
out.
No, I
No,
wasn't the first time I saw it either, to be honest with you.
no, I remember. I actually, it was. I actually had finished college. I took a year out and went backpacking around the world for a
Mm.
year.
Okay.
And I remember coming back, and I just remember that year really being dominated by the Matrix that came out. I'm thinking, oh my god, the Matrix is like way better than the Phantom Menace. And I
Mm.
was really disappointed by the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I was blown away by Revenge of the Sith. I wasn't a
Yeah.
massive fan of Attack of the Clones, but Revenge of the Sith pulled it
Yeah.
like the redeem. I remember thinking at the time, oh, Lucas has redeemed himself with Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
And I still think that's a masterpiece.
Wow,
So
what a masterpiece! I'm
no, I
surprised
really
'cause I
do.
don't think it's been. I don't think it's. I've not heard it being called that. I liked it. I mean, like episode one, like you, I felt a bit disappointed. There were a couple of wow moments in there. That was the lightsaber scene when Maul come out and he lit his lightsaber for the
Yeah,
first time
that
with the
was
double blade. I
cool.
mean, that was well.
That
The
was
pod
cool.
race was good as well. I like
Yeah,
that as well. Attack of the Clones, I felt was too heavy on the CGI, and I just prefer the visual look of things, like with guys in like stormtrooper suits as opposed to CGI characters in clone armor and stuff like that. And I thought the Revenge of the Sith, as much as I did enjoy it, I felt. I don't know. I just feel that maybe Anakin was maybe seduced that little bit too easy. But then when you look into the story from episode one, Palpatine's manipulated him all the way through that. And
yeah.
then you see it as well a lot in the Clone Wars as well, which the animated series, which makes it seem that much more sense when it comes to Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, I think when I say masterpiece, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are,
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm thinking what I'm really referring to is the scope of the story.
Right. Okay.
And I think, yeah, and I think that's where Star Wars, where George Lucas really does excel.
Yeah.
So I guess when you asked me to come on, that you were going to ask me about what makes Star Wars great. So this kind of links into my. I kind of need to give you this answer for you to understand where I'm coming from a little bit.
That's
so
fine. Yeah.
if that's okay. So because I think it's very easy to. So it's I don't think you can. So Aristotle said that he made a quote about the sum being greater than its parts, and I think there is so much to Star Wars. There's so many ingredients,
Yeah.
and I think the Star Wars is at its best when all of those individual elements, when all of those they come together, and I think the first film encapsulates where, and well, maybe Empire as well. All of those individual elements are at the peak. So and it's the whole story really captures the imagination, but you can break down literally. There's the story, the script, the acting, the production, the effects, the directing, the music, the sound effects, the cinematography, the sets, the locations, the mythos, the use of character archetypes, the promotion, the hype, even the posters, the trailers, the toys. It all comes together, and I think and with Star Wars as well, it all happened at the right place at the right time. But what I really love about Star Wars is, and I think this is where George Lucas is really clever, is he's overt about this. He talks about this quite a lot. Is he attempted to create a modern day fairy tale, a modern day mythology. It's a retelling of many classical mythologies and stories. From and it's very hard to define Star Wars, I think, because you could call it a fantasy, you could call it a space opera. There's elements of Western films. It's a war movie. It's pulp. It's Arthurian. There's samurai elements, and I think all of those, when it all comes together, it's incredible. And I think when Star Wars has not been so good, there's been one or more of those elements has been missing, if that makes sense.
I mean, I find it interesting that you said it was more prevalent in Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. What do you think it was missing then? All those ingredients from Return of the Jedi.
Oh well, I think I love Return of the Jedi. I love it. It's like it's my favorite. But I mean, it's my favorite because it was my film. Like it was the one that and it's and Jabba, the whole Jabba bit at the start is incredible. But George Lucas made Star Wars for families and for kids, and it is it's the most child like one, isn't it? It's there's a bit of a retelling, a bit of a rehash, and the Ewoks, defeating the Empire. It's not really that believable at the end.
Do you think that was done purposely then? Because after Empire Strikes Back, that was quite a dark sort of place, wasn't it? It was a dark time for the rebellion and Luke and Han and stuff like that within that movie. Do you think he wanted to try and because I thought Irvin Kershon did a fantastic job with Empire Strikes Back, considering he had to, do a movie, the sequel to Star Wars. I thought he did a great job. I think he got all the elements right. So do you think it was, because a lot of people saying that, Han Solo maybe should have died in Return of the Jedi, just to give it that little bit of edge, because then you're sitting there watching it thinking, oh, crikey, if Han Solo's died, who else is going to die? And do you think that kind of element was missing? Do you think it was toned down too much?
I think he's probably just exhausted by then, and didn't really want to direct it. He brought in Marquis, is it? I don't know.
Richard Marquand.
He didn't really want to direct it. I think he was knackered. He just probably wanted to get the trilogy finished. I know, like the whole Ewok thing was supposed to be Wookiees, wasn't it? Which you just couldn't film, So, I mean, there are some dark elements in Jedi. I mean, when Luke confronts the Emperor, I mean, that's some really dark. That gets pretty dark. And there's that one scene where he's like hiding from Vader, and he's like in the dark, and there's a shadow over his face. he's really stopping. He's really having to work hard not to turn to the dark side.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that part was really, really well written.
Yeah.
When Vader's trying to fight him and he wants him to, and he, Luke's not budging, and he uses his sister as bait. I just thought that was so well thought of and so well written. I just love that scene. That was just incredible. The music, the lightsaber scene and stuff like that. It wasn't great graphically as what we used, like I say used to, is what we've seen in like say like the prequels and stuff like that. But for that time, I just thought the emotion behind that scene was actually absolutely incredible.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's one of the great. This is why it's you got to think of the whole thing. And that's why I said Revenge of the Sith is a masterpiece, because it's at that point you realize how big the scope of the story is. And in Return of the Jedi, it's the culmination of excuse me, the Vader's redemption story, and that's fundamentally what the story's about. It's the sins of your father, which is a very common mythological story, and the reason that's so powerful is Vader is the evil bad guy, but in the end he redeems himself, and it's Luke brings out the humanity in Vader, and out of a love for his son, he redeems himself, and I think that's one of the most powerful stories that's retold in lots of different media. And that's a really powerful, that's the real powerful bit in Jedi. And obviously with Revenge, you get the culmination of Anakin's temptation to the dark side, and Obi-Wan's failure. And so Obi-Wan's quite powerful in that bit, in terms of he's you're my friend, Anakin. He's So I think Revenge for me like pulled on the strings a little bit as well, because of how poignant Return of the Jedi was when I was a kid.
So after Revenge of the Sith, then we started going into the animated side of things. Now, at the time, I wasn't a big fan, but then when I started getting into, because you had the Genki Tartakovsky shorts, which looking at now I can appreciate a lot more, and I think they're really, really good and very well done. But then you had the Filoni Clone Wars, which I just found absolutely incredible. The story arcs that they eventually got around to telling then, and the character development, like with Count Dooku, and who else was there, General Grievous and Asajj Ventress. I just found that all really interesting. I mean, they brought back Darth Maul. I mean, what were your thoughts on the Clone Wars?
Hated it. Hated the movie. I thought the movie, I was like, oh my god, what are they doing? I thought this is a mistake. The first I didn't like the first 2 seasons. I was like, I was quite negative about it. That during this whole time, people forget during this whole time that the half of the fan base was split again. Half of the fan base really were against George Lucas and the prequels, and I did not like the Clone Wars. But by the third season, the third season onwards, I was like, okay, right, I can
now we're getting somewhere.
Now I can see where we're going with this, and so I think Filoni turned me around, to be totally honest. I think I definitely came around to thinking, actually, there's some depth to this, actually, and I quite like. I can see what they're doing now by creating some more of the lore and more of the backstory. And it's only after you kind of it's only sort of later when you start analyzing some of those episodes and start looking into it with a little bit more of an eye to the detail, that you realize that actually there's they have really opened up a lot of backstory to a lot of different characters that had superficial parts in the prequels. And I think that's one of the things with Star Wars as well, that it definitely does age with time. Things do get better with time, and whether that will happen with the sequel trilogy, I don't know, but it's definitely happened to me with the prequels for sure. I've definitely appreciated them more as time's gone on.
And I I feel the same way. I can appreciate the prequels more now, and that's mainly down to the fact that we had the animated series, the Clone Wars. Because if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would still be too fussed about them. But let's move on to the prequels then. I mean, George Lucas sold Star Wars, Disney bought them out. What were your thoughts on that? Did you think, were you expecting more Star Wars? Well, obviously they bought them out for a reason. So what were your thoughts then when they announced the next trilogy?
Oh, I loved it. I was all in. I was like, I
Mm.
was proper hyped for it. That was a really exciting period.
Yeah,
We had Rebels, and the build up to Force Awakens was like being a kid again. I
yeah,
mean, buying all the toys again, going to Toys R Us for the Force Friday events.
yeah,
I was totally back in. I was like, really enjoying Rebel Force Radio and Talk Star Wars, and that was like a real invigoration of it brought it all back.
yeah,
So that was a great time.
yeah.
I think a lot of people felt that way. I mean,
Mm.
I remember like when they released new waves of the toys, and
Yeah.
being there when the toys came out in Toys on those evenings. I mean, people were grabbing the toy. That was like it was a scrimmage. So it was great, the build up. Force
Yeah.
Awakens, the actual film. I do remember watching it and thinking, oh, I'm a bit disappointed. Um, I wasn't totally convinced.
Yeah.
Um, there were, again though, it's if we go back to the different constituent parts, there's some
Yeah.
really good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I like Ray. I like Daisy Ridley. I think she's a good. I can get on board with that character. I thought Ray's theme is beautiful. Ray's theme
Yes.
tune is
Yeah. Well,
such a
John Williams
beautiful.
again just did an
Oh,
exceptional job.
yeah, such a beautiful
Yeah.
theme tune.
Mm.
But I think the fundamental problem with the sequels is the story. You
Yeah.
don't, of a story this size, with the amount of money they were spending. um, I remember one of the early interviews where where they had JJ and Kathleen and Daisy on stage, and they were talking about Snoke, and they asked Daisy a question about that, and she said, "Oh yeah, you mean the one that's supposed to be he's supposed to be Plagueis, isn't he?" And then they tapped her on the knee, and she quickly shut up. And
Ugh.
so I kind of feel like they probably did have they did have a story that they had in mind, but
Yeah.
they they fiddled around too much, and then I don't know, it just totally lost its way. And
Is that because they? Well, I mean, he may well have been Plagueis, but do you think it was like the Last Jedi that kind of like derailed that with Rian Johnson just killing Snoke off?
possibly giving him too much freedom.
Yeah.
It should have been the story. It should have been about Plagueis, shouldn't it? When you think about
Yeah.
it, that for me was always one of the, like, after seeing the prequels, the bit that I came away with, what was the opera scene. That was the mystery that was left
Yeah.
untold. The you know the have you ever heard the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Yeah.
That was like the untold
Mm.
mystery.
But,
And I thought,
wasn't he dead? Wasn't he dead around about that time then? I thought Palpatine had killed him.
well, yeah, it was never really clear, was it?
Right.
And you know, and was he dead, or who was there somebody behind Palpatine all along? Or so
Mm.
anyway, I just thought they were gonna do like,
Yeah.
um if yeah, I don't know, for some reason in my mind I thought they were gonna do a Plagueis. There was somebody else, a larger figurehead behind it all. And
Yeah.
um so I don't know. Yeah, they lost their way with it. It was a bit like
Yeah.
Solo. I remember when Solo was coming out, and I was like, this is going to be about this has got to be about Han Solo meeting freeing Chewie,
Yeah,
and then going back and freeing the Wookiees from the
yeah,
Empire. That's what I thought that was going to be about, and that turned out to be nothing like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So I don't
I
know.
mean,
Maybe you got preconceived ideas in your head about what something's going to be like, and
do you think that's where the fandom goes wrong? Then do you think that's the problem? Because many people have said on here that their expectations of Star Wars is high, especially our generation, because we grew up with the original trilogy, and that is how Shabby described it as lightning in a bottle. And do you think they've been trying to catch that ever since, and they've not quite mastered that yet?
Yeah. I mean, I think yeah. I mean, I don't know that J.J. Abrams has the storytelling. I mean, I mean, there needs to be this overarching story, doesn't there? And
Yeah.
I'm not sure what what the overarching story was supposed to be in the
Mm.
sequels, or where they were going with it. And if
Yeah.
we're not, if you're left, and the mystery box thing with JJ is always a bit surface level, right? There wasn't a great deal of depth to it.
No.
So you're left with stories like, how did Maz Kanata get the bloody lightsaber, and
Yeah, I
kind
know.
of surface level
I know.
mysteries that don't
Yeah.
really, you know, um,
He did the same again in the Rise of Skywalker. Oh, Ray, I've been meaning to tell you. And you tell Ray what? I mean, this is Finn saying that before they get sucked down into that pit, and then
yeah,
nothing ever comes of that.
yeah,
So,
exactly,
um,
exactly.
do you think the prequels then, the sequel, should I say, were a wasted opportunity?
Oh well, I think that's I think that's clear, isn't
Yeah.
it? I
Yeah.
mean, they're scrambling. They've been scrambling ever since.
Mm.
So yeah, proper wasted opportunity. And
Yeah.
yeah, you just, I think, again, going back to what made the original trilogy good, or certainly, the all those constituent parts. He got the right people in, didn't he?
Yeah.
You know, I've got some criticisms of where things didn't go well with. They didn't make the right decisions with the prequel trilogies. You can pick
Yeah.
things out, that could have improved things.
Yeah.
But yeah, they didn't get the right. They didn't have the right. Didn't it just didn't it did just didn't come together, didn't it? There wasn't that.
No.
I think the Force Awakens. There was at least with the Force Awakens, you're left thinking, okay, right, this could
Yeah.
it could, and then I think it was just the what's his name that did the Last Jedi?
Rian Johnson.
Yeah, the yeah, the fact that he just wanted to subvert your expectation and just change it. I don't know. It just
Yeah.
didn't work. It didn't work.
No.
It's difficult to be like uh you know with any kind of art or any creative endeavor. You make your decisions based on on
Yeah.
your position at the time, and it's easy to
Well,
quarterback it, isn't it, after the time. And
I mean, the thing is, I mean,
uh,
this can like sort of like go into the next question. So, um, how important is it for you with the story within the Star Wars universe? Because I think that's what it massively lacked within the sequel trilogy. So overall, with every Star Wars that we've had, the original trilogy, the sequels, the prequels, the TV series and stuff like that, how important is the story to you within Star Wars?
Well, the story is the most important bit. So, I mean, first of all, you got to have some archetypal characters, and they've got to follow a journey. So,
Mm.
with the original Star Wars, you had Luke was like Arthur, Obi-Wan was like Merlin.
Yeah.
So there's that Arthurian sort of hero's journey. You had your cowboy smuggler, you had your princess, you had your space Nazis, and then you
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
the chivalry and the knighthood of the Jedi's, um, and this unfolding tragedy and redemption story, and then
Mm.
the coming of age of Luke. Um, and and also he played off so many. I mean, like all good creators, he pinched stuff from everywhere, didn't he?
He
It's
did.
just littered with. You can see him picking stuff from so many other films.
Yeah.
So Hero with a Thousand Faces was the Joseph
Mm.
Campbell, Kurosawa and the Last Fortress. Even things like the screen wipes. That segment that move you from one location to another. That came from the Last Fortress. Isaac Asimov and Foundation, Frank Herbert and Dune, Buck Rogers, Flash
Mm.
Gordon. The simple crawl setting the stage of where you're going to be, and
Yeah. Yeah.
him having to go and fight against the Unions so that you'd have the credits at the end.
Yeah.
Um, and then the spaghetti western, the spaghetti western elements, the dam busters for the bloody trench run. I mean, that's almost
Yeah.
scene to scene.
Yeah.
So the story is everything, and the fact that George used common archetypal characters and scenes and things that we're familiar with from other classical tales and films breeds a sense of familiarity, even though you're in a totally alien world.
Yeah.
It is somewhat, the story and the themes are somewhat familiar to you,
Yeah.
and you can follow them along, and so you go on the journey with the characters. With the
Yeah.
sequel trilogy, we were like, well, where's I'm not sure where I'm not sure I'm following the journey, and I'm not sure I can plot. A and B. I'm not getting to C. I don't really understand where I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that it just didn't sit right. So yeah, no.
Mm.
So I think fundamentally, if the story's not right, then then all the other parts could be great. Like you could have great
Yeah.
music, great sound effects,
Yeah.
great effects. But if the story's not right, then you haven't
Mm.
got a you haven't got a film.
Because I've heard a lot of people say that, because there were so many issues with the recent offering, which was the Acolyte, and
Yeah.
I there was a lot of sort of like real world issues, or sort of like agendas, should I say, that was put into that. Now, listen, I don't mind these kind of things being put into your TV series, because every film, every TV series has an element of real world issues put into it. But what the thing was with Star Wars, with the original trilogy, was that it was so well blended in, and George Lucas told that story perfectly to fit into the universe that he created. It didn't feel like it was, like you said, it was familiar, but it didn't feel like it was real life issues and like mythologies or ideals or anything like that that were being forced upon us. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, I think the common I there were some bits to the Acolyte that I quite liked, and I thought, oh,
Yeah.
this could be really interesting. Um, but yeah, I think Lucasfilm, they've just they're without getting too political, Stu,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
fall. They're based in San Francisco. They're in California. It's a very progressive place, and
Yeah.
they've fallen into the trap of putting group identity above anything else. And I think
Yeah.
we've seen with election results and other things like that that doesn't sit right with people. We had as you said, an alien world with people of all different colors and shapes and sizes, and
Yep.
we already had that. We didn't need it forced down your neck.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think when actors are promoting a film, when they're leading with those kind of stories,
Yeah.
and celebrating that, it's unnecessary. Actually, you should be selling the story.
Yeah.
um you
Yeah.
know Star Wars fans typically don't care. We're already a creative, open-minded bunch. We
Yeah.
don't need to be sold about what gender you are or what race you are. We love Star Wars because it's a fantasy story that takes you out of this world and takes you into a new world where
Yeah.
anything is possible.
Yeah.
So I think that's where Kathleen Kennedy's going wrong. That's Princess Leia was, an incredible. She already bucked the trend of the typical princess. She was a princess, but she wasn't a typical princess. She was
No, no.
organizing
Yeah.
she was bossing bloody Han Solo and Luke Skywalker around and commanding the rebellion. So
yeah.
you
So she
don't
was,
need
a strong female character, wasn't she? I mean, 'cause that was a question I was going to ask a bit later, was how important are strong female characters within Star Wars?
I think it's important. I think it's important that there are strong characters represented in media from all types of different things. But I don't think it
Yeah.
needs to be, it's a consequence. It's not. It doesn't have to be thrown around and it's um, that's not a focus on the group identity. That's focus
Yeah.
on the actions of somebody, not the
Yeah.
action. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's unnecessary. All this forces female stuff. It's not necessary.
I mean, is that I mean, would you say that's then definitely down to Lucasfilm or Disney for hiring these writers that are I'd kind of say, like, I don't want to say the word extremist because I think that's a bit too harsh, but in a way they kind of are, because they are really pushing that forcefulness. I mean, yeah,
it's activism, Stu, isn't it? It's activism.
Yeah,
Activism.
that's it. Yeah.
And it's just a sign of the times. And I pointed out that they're in San Francisco because the media bubbles are, we're in London or in the coasts in America, and they're in their own bubble, and I'm not sure it's necessary.
No, it's not, because it's dividing the fans, and I mean, it's as a whole. I mean, again, not going to get too political about it, but we, as a Earth, we're pretty divided anyway. We don't need any more division, surely.
Yeah, let's not focus on the fact that there's men and there's the differences between the groups. Let's just make the best film and put the best people in, and naturally good stories are going to especially in space. I mean, there's you're gonna have people, and you're gonna have aliens, and there's monkey lizards, and that's right, it's monkey, and there's the limit is your imagination. You don't need to I think that was one of the things with the Acolyte, wasn't it? There were, I remember some of the some of the interviews they were doing when they were talking about it being the gayest Star Wars ever. I don't care. I don't really care about that.
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
But when you hear people, when you hear them lead with that, it puts people's backs up. I mean, whether it should or not, but and to be told that fans of, like, our generation don't understand Star Wars if they don't like the Acolyte, I just think it's absolute nonsense. Because we've said loads of times in the series that Star Wars is for everybody. It always has been for everybody. So why segregate it and aim it at certain? Okay, fair enough. You need to get in new viewers and new fans and stuff like that. I appreciate that, but don't do it at the expense of the older fans, which leads me on to my next question. How important do you think the older generation of Star Wars fans are to the Star Wars franchise?
I think every generation of fans is important. Again, I don't think this segmentation is just unnecessary. We're all fans, and we want all generations to like Star Wars, and Star Wars is supposed to be for families. It's supposed to be for everybody. No, it's not
the
made
reason
for
I
one.
asked that, the reason I asked that is because the older generation of Star Wars fans have been touted or labeled as toxic and bigots because of the fact that a lot of them didn't like the Acolyte, and to me, I think that's totally unfair.
Well, I think it's just because people have voiced their like I've just done, voiced the fact that we don't, I don't care what sexuality people are, it's like, when you meet somebody for the first time and the first thing they tell you is I'm gay. It's like, I don't really care whether you're gay or not. I want to know about you. If I'm sure that is not the only thing about you. I'm sure that's not the most important thing about you. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't go up to someone and say,
Yeah, we live in a far more accepting world than what we did back in the 80s. So things like that shouldn't matter. That shouldn't be the forefront of the start of a conversation, or the forefront of a TV series or a movie is the character's gender identity or sexuality.
or
No one
race,
cares.
or
Or
race,
race.
or
Yeah,
race.
yeah. There you
You
go.
know,
There you go. And
it's
it's
just,
just incredible that people lead with this. And what can you do? What can you do?
we're getting a little bit political, but
Yes.
you know, Martin Luther King said we should judge people by the content of our character and not, you know.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
for some reason that message has been lost in the last over the last 10 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's a real shame because
Yeah.
you know, because I think most of us really don't care. You know,
That's it.
we're not. I don't think we're a judgmental lot. You
No.
know, I think we're pretty open-minded.
Yeah.
It's just when you know, it doesn't need to be shoveled down your face all the time.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Let's move away from that segment of
Yeah,
the conversation.
yeah.
What was it about Star Wars? Sorry, Bob. Sorry, Ron. What was that, mate?
Yeah. Let's talk about Ula.
Ula.
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask you about her in a
All right.
bit.
Or
But
Yana Dalgargan.
oh yeah, yeah. We
Yeah.
do like a bit of her. What was it about Star Wars that really stood out for you?
I think I don't think well of the music. I think with Return of the Jedi, it's the creatures that you that the palace scene is on an when you go back and rewatch the palace scene, that
Yeah.
is on an those that's on another level. You know, all those you see you see different creatures each time, like, you know,
Mm.
lurking around the corner, or you know, you suddenly realize, oh, that's a Bomar monk and he's carrying his brain around in a bowl, you know,
Yeah.
because he's rejecting. Here you go. Here's one for you. The Bomar monks were so determined to reject materialism that they went so far they wanted to reject their bodies, so they had their brains taken out of their heads and put in a jar in a bowl, and then they were carried around by a mechanical
Mm.
spider. How about that for you?
I know about the Boma monks, and I thought in the old EU canon that Bib Fortuna was actually turned into a Boma monk. I
Well, I think, well, he might. Well, I mean, we got a fat bib in the end, did we? Fat bib.
we did, but I mean, I thought within the EU that he had actually decided to
Maybe.
become a Boma. I don't know. I wasn't too much into the EU, so if anybody knows, then please let us know. Oh, where was I going? Oh,
Oh,
for the love of
you,
God!
you asked me about one thing. There are some other things we haven't mentioned.
Yo, go
So,
on.
how about just again, this is a bit surface level, but how cool were the ships and the vehicles? You know, that was a
Yeah,
cool thing, wasn't it? And how Lucas bucked the trend of having like the modernist style, you know, the modern look, you know, and actually wanted it to be lived in and
yeah,
industrial, and I think Alien was a bit like that as well, you know, which came out
yeah.
at the time. You know, truckers in space, so that was cool. Um, the imagery was amazing. The clothing, the yeah, you know, the Empire were very clearly, you know, Nazis, weren't they? With the, you know, the
Mm,
stormtroopers, and Vader's samurai helmet is, you know, just a thing of beauty, isn't it?
mm.
Um, I mean, it was visually, you know, very beautiful. And I think Industrial Light and Magic, you know, he had to form his own bloody effects company,
Well, he
and
did. I
you know,
mean, to be able to do that, because how Star Wars managed to get up and running in the first place is beyond me. Because you see the Empire of Dreams and stuff like that, and it was just absolutely built from scratch. It was well overdue, overrunning with because they wanted to release it at a certain date. It overran. It was the production costs was soaring and stuff like that, and to pull it off and for it to be the success it was just incredible.
yeah, and I mean, they went on to become, you know, the greatest effects house, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
there is. You know, and you go now and look at go and look at the original, you know, the first, at least the first, well, the first two Star Trek films,
yeah,
you know, and you can see, you know, that craft moving on in Wrath of Khan, the bloody, you know, the model work in that, when the camera's panning around the Enterprise, that's just,
yeah.
whoa. You know, they've really come into their own with the model making by then. Um, So yeah, I remember being obsessed with Industrial Light and Magic and wanting to watch all their films. And I remember as I got older and I was getting into more action movies, and I was obsessed with Terminator 2 and the the liquid T1000 that they designed. And
do you miss those kind of effects? Do you miss those kind of effects, like the old school, the models and the stuff like that, and the actual sets and stuff?
Yeah, it's a real lost art, isn't it? The same with the puppetry. The puppetry, that whole era of Jim Henson puppets, the puppetry and the monster making and then the model making. I mean, they were real artisans that did that. And there's some real lost craft work there.
I mean, the one good thing I did like about the sequels was the fact that they did go back to the old way of doing things. They used CGI when they needed it to. They did use a lot of set building and stuff like that, and actual suits for the stormtroopers, which I thought visually they looked a lot better than what they did with the clones in the prequels.
I remember being a little bit disappointed with it because I thought there wasn't enough design iteration. So that's the one thing I did think that was clever about the prequels was who was the chief designer? I've forgotten his name.
God.
In any case, I remember the behind the scenes, and I remember them talking about the design progression and how they had to work backwards, and so in Phantom Menace the ships are shiny, and then you can see they retrospectively built in the design heritage. And I just felt that the sequel trilogy was 30 years later, and there hadn't been enough iteration.
Okay,
and I just thought it was a little bit lazy. It was a little bit lazy. Although I thought Kylo Ren looked, had potential. But then they didn't really go anywhere with him. They should have. Yeah, he was a bit of a letdown in the end, Kylo Ren, I thought.
Yeah.
Do you know what I thought? Sorry, Stu. Do you know what I really thought? One thing I thought that was going to be a reality was in The Force Awakens. I was sure this was a thing. When he kills Han. When he's on the bridge.
Yeah.
And Han comes over, and they're having that conversation, and then the light shines over Kylo's. The shadow comes over, and then you see him stabbing Han.
Yeah.
I thought that it was going to turn out that he actually didn't stab Han. And actually what had happened was Han knew that Kylo had to kill him, and that Snoke or Plagueis wouldn't let him off not doing that. So he knew he was going to die. But rather than make his son do it, I thought he grabbed his hand and pulled the lightsaber into him. And
really,
and I thought he'd saved his son by killing him by sacrificing himself. And I thought, and so I remember thinking, this is a clever piece of storytelling. It's like a reverse kind of redemption. It's like he is saving his son by sacrificing himself. And so I remember thinking, going into Last Jedi, this is going to be the way for Kylo Ren to kind of his story to sort of flourish, because people are going to think he's a monster, but actually he didn't do it. But it didn't. But it didn't do that. But in my head, that was where they were going.
Yeah. That's an interesting concept. A very interesting concept. It really is. I would never have thought of that, because I thought Han was generally trying to like swinging back round again and stuff like that. But
don't worry, Stu. No one else thought that either. Just Bob with his crazy ideas. No one else thought that.
Well, we've come to the top of the hour. We've pretty much discussed most of the of what I wanted to ask you and talk about. I've got one more question, but this one makes no sense now, because we basically, I was going to overall what makes Star Wars great, but you've already bloody answered it, didn't you? So I'm going to have to scrub that out and think of another question now.
No, I think it's a good question. And
okay, sorry, let me ask it officially. So last question for you then, Bob. Overall, what makes Star Wars great? There you go.
I think I think ultimately what makes Star Wars as a whole great
Yeah.
is the overall story. That's
Yeah.
what it is. It's about, it's this huge, and this is why I really liked Revenge of the Sith, because you kind of, when you pull back the camera and you see the scope of the universe that's been created, and this huge tale that's told over multiple generations, the Skywalker saga, it's just this vast story. um and 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 there's something in there for everyone, isn't there? There's
Yeah.
different archetypal characters that different people latch onto. There's music, there's effects, there's different and then there's a whole set of backstories around all the different characters. It's this huge world that you can transport yourself to.
Mm.
Um, I was really blown away by the Old Republic, and what BioWare were doing, and the storylines behind all those Old Republic stories. That's what I wanted them to remake, because some of those cinematic trailers, that's some of the
Yeah.
best Star Wars ever. So I
Mm.
was hoping that's where they would go, but yeah, I think of all the different, stories that we read and different films and things we watch, it's hard to think of something that's as vast. Maybe Lord of the Rings in
Yeah.
terms of scope and scale, but actually probably Star Wars is even bigger than that because it's galactic.
Mm.
It's
Do you feel then Star Wars has the same impact on kids today as what it did when we were kids?
oh, that's really hard to say. I don't think so. For those that enjoy it, probably, but there's so much more. I don't know. Is there more? I think whenever you try to understand the young kids of this generation, you typically get it wrong. So
Yeah.
I probably don't know. There are definitely lots of young fans that are into it,
Yeah.
but there's so many other things these days for kids to be interested in, aren't there?
Yeah. But then that's the
So
thing. That's,
I'm,
that's what I liked about Star Wars is that it the when we were kids, it was all new and stuff like that, and it was something that we'd never seen before, and it just stood out head and shoulders above everything else. I don't think the Star Wars of today really does that as much because of everything else that is out there.
yeah, and I don't think. Yeah, I mean, when I think, there are definitely lots of, when I think about like Star Wars Celebration and the conventions, and when I see young
Yeah.
people there are definitely some characters that are really beloved by the young. Ahsoka's is
Yeah.
very popular
Yeah, yeah.
with
Yeah,
young
yeah.
people. Um, so I don't know. Um, I hope they can find. I know they're talking about Simon Kinberg. I hope they can find a writer that can really. I would. I would. I would. I would bring George Lucas back in some kind of
Ooh.
consulting role, and
Do
I
but
would.
do you
I,
think
I
do you
would.
think
I would.
yeah, but you would, but do you think Disney and Lucasfilm
No,
will?
of course they're not. Of course they're not. But they
Yeah.
should do. They should do. Um, because I don't think the story team they've got have really have done it yet. I am hopeful about Dave Filoni and where they're going with
Yeah.
Filoni sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I actually hope they kind of remake Heir to the Empire. I hope we get
Mm.
Mara Jade, and I hope we get,
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to see the hand of the Emperor, and
Well, I
um
mean, that would have made a great prequel, sequel trilogy. It really would have
yeah,
done.
yeah, it really would have. I don't think
Um,
they executed Ahsoka that they didn't execute it well enough in the end, but
yeah.
there's definitely stories there. The whole Mortis arc is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of mythology behind that. I'm quite interested to see where that goes.
Yeah. Well,
It's a
hopefully
shame.
they do pick up on that and carry it on.
Yeah, I hope so. So I'm hopeful. I tend to be.
Mm.
You can't. You're not going to get blocked. You're not going to get 10 out of 10 wins for everything, are you? And it's arguable. We
Yeah.
haven't with the Star Wars films that we've had. Let's face it. Not all of them have been 10 out of 10 hits. you know, and there are things that, you know, subjective things that you could criticize, you know, in all of them. But
I mean,
but yeah,
are you thinking positively about Star Wars in the future, or are you
yeah.
right? You are. Okay, cool.
Well, I mean, you know, I, I, I try not to be overly negative. I mean,
Yeah,
I'd like the Star Wars to be better,
yeah,
but um, I think if you're a creative person, Stu, whenever you make something, you can't produce, you know, you have some duds, don't you? You know,
yeah,
so
yeah,
like, you know, so I think I'm a little bit more open-minded to failing. I think, like,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, I'm not, you know, I would rather they kept making Star Wars and had some failures and kept going and kept expanding the, you know, the
yeah,
universe. And I don't
yeah,
mind that they're not all amazing. Um, but I just like them to get better. I'd like them to. The worst thing is if they if they keep repeating the same
yeah, yeah.
mistakes. You know, you got to learn from your mistakes a little bit. And I worry that
Well,
I worry that some of the executives there are a bit too stubborn and you know.
but what I don't understand, Bob, is that Kathleen Kennedy, she was part of that original trilogy. She saw, you know, how George Lucas did things, and with Lucasfilm, and she was part of that from the very beginning. So why now all of a sudden has she turned into this flipping idiot that's just, you know, I don't understand. She was part of that original trilogy.
Yeah, and that's what worries me a little bit is they keep making like they did the same thing with Indiana Jones, and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do keep making the same mistake. But again, I think it's more symptomatic of the kind of political activist
Right.
kind of
Okay.
agenda in San
Mm.
Francisco more than the, you know, than anything else. And they just need to leave that out of mythological
Yeah.
storytelling. Let's just get back
Yes.
to what made
Yes.
all those, you know, amazing classical stories exciting. And
Absolutely.
that's what George Lucas pulled on, didn't he? He pulled on
Yeah.
classical classics, the classics stand the test of time. You know, when you go to read, you know, a story, you can always bet on those old stories. They still stand up, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
go back to those and build a modern mythology around those old stories. That's what they should be doing.
Absolutely.
Oh, and can
Absolutely.
I just say on the final thing,
You can. You can.
of why Star Wars is great is, and going back to kids and young people, is it because it's a modern mythology. It does have a very healthy positive looking set of value propositions behind it. So it does. So when Star Wars is at its best, it does teach young people valuable sets of values and morals, and you know, and the whole redemption story is that
Yeah.
classical story of you can mess up and you can make mistakes, but as long as you come round in the end, you can redeem anything. You can
Mm.
redeem any past in, you know, afflictions, and Vader had some of the worst ones, but in the end,
Did
in
he
the
just? Yeah.
end, in the end, it
Yeah.
was yeah. We won't talk about the Order
Yeah.
60. You
Yeah.
know, we won't talk about the younglings, but
No, no, no.
um,
Well, for God's sake, no, no, no. That's crikey, no. But yeah.
but yeah,
Oh dear.
we all punched the air, didn't we, when Luke destroyed the Death Star? You know,
Yes.
everyone, you
Yeah.
know, and when Darth Vader threw the Palpatine through the, you know, you know, so
Just Starcraft. Yeah.
so there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, Bob, I've got to say, Ram as well. Let's come to the end of the hour. I've got to
Yeah,
say, really have enjoyed um talking Star Wars with you.
yeah,
I love the deep conversations about it, the mythology side of things, and the values and the old school stories that Star Wars are set upon. I just love all
yeah,
that kind of stuff, and I just wish that they would have kept to those values, because as far as I'm concerned, Star Wars was never broken. So why try and change a formula and change it when it doesn't need changing? I don't get that,
yeah.
but there you are.
Can I point out something to you?
Yes, you can, Mum. What?
Technically, E.T.'s finger is canon.
Well, yeah, because E.T. was in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Phantom Menace.
Yeah. So
In the council chamber.
The E.T. finger is a thing.
Yeah. What was it? What did it do in Star Wars then?
It glowed, and he's got a glowing finger.
Did it?
No. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, it glowed in E.T. the film, but did it?
Yeah.
I didn't see it glow in Star Wars.
Well, if it glowed basically, if he's got a glowing finger, then he can glow anywhere, can't he?
What would have been great is if, like, in Return of the Revenge of the Sith, when Anakin was laying there all burnt up, and E.T. went up to him and went, "Ouch," like that. That would have been great.
Yeah, we wanted E.T. to finger Anakin.
Oh, for crying out loud. On that note, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you watching. Take care, stay safe, and we shall see you in the next one. Bye for now.
All right. Bye.